Yes, Spurs fans, how are we all doing? Welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. This is going to be your Thursday panel show before our two friendlies on Saturday, which I'm looking forward to. Double watch along, two for the price of one. And we're also going to be discussing a little bit about that, what that kind of means. I think it has a lot to do with the outgoings, potentially, that Thomas Frank is going to have to decide on at some point because, man, we have a very bloated squad. We'll also be discussing some of the transfer rumors that have come about. We'll especially be talking about the Sonny rumors. That stuff is not going away. Apparently, LAFC are the club that's definitely very interested in him, and it seems like he's not going anywhere other than maybe potentially the LAFC, or he's staying at Tottenham Hotspur. We'll be talking about that. Talk about João Palhinha, whether we think that's going to get done, and the importance of a number six. Some people feel like that's the most important signing of the summer. Others feel a little bit differently about it. We'll be talking yet again, even though I was saying in the back end to these guys, like I'm getting tired of saying Morgan Gibbs-White's name. We will be discussing his possibility of coming to Spurs. He's left his training camp in Portugal, then went back to his training camp in Portugal, I think, because he had a family emergency. So seems like, he was able to take care of that. But he's still being a good boy, I guess, and being a very loyal servant to Nottingham Forest by continuing to just, chug along and participating in the training for the summer. But hopefully we can get that deal done, or maybe we'll talk about whether you're just kind of getting tired of the whole saga and you just want to move on. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about some stuff that Matisse Tell had to say about him signing for the club, and actually the fact that Thomas Frank didn't seem to have any decision over that, and whether you think maybe he should have. Not saying I'm against Matisse Tell, but just found that to be a bit interesting. We have the same crew from last Thursday who I thought were brilliant, so I thought I'd bring them on again. No Dave tonight because he is taking care of his dad over in the hospital, but he should be back next week. So everybody do think of Dave in the chat, please. But good to have you both on again. Luke to my left or my right, whatever it is on the virtual screens. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me back on. Pleasure. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much. As you said, Morgan Gibbs-White. What a story that's evolved to. We went from the transfer being done so quickly, and then it all done, and we thinking, right, we barely need to speak about that. To 3 weeks later, we're still discussing it. So yeah, all fun and games, I guess.
I think it's going to be one of those transfers, if it does end up happening, up like top 5 weirdest transfer sagas, to ever, occur in football. It's definitely going to make some sort of list of that accord. But Soren, are you also getting tired of saying Morgan Gibbs-White's name, or are you happy being asked the same question over and over and over again about him?
Yeah, do you know what? It's one of those that I think I'm a little bit more see what happens with it.
Right.
I still think it could happen. But I do also think the club should be looking at alternatives now. But I just don't get how Nottingham Forest, even if we have done something slightly wrong, just how it cannot be pushed through, because you've met the release clause, if there is the release clause, and it's just baffling. It really is. We've shouted for so long about Tottenham not meeting release clauses or pay the money or just act quickly. And the first time we actually go and do it, it's like, no, you're not having the player. And I just don't get how a club can basically refuse to sell a player that has a release clause that has been met, no matter how it's been met. I just don't get how it can not happen.
Yeah. It's almost like you thought water was wet, and apparently it isn't.
Yeah.
You kind of thought gravity exists, but I
For
guess
me,
it doesn't. It's
I
flipped our
think
world
the deal
upside
should
down.
have just been concluded and then left to the FA or whatever to decide whether it's actually legal or not. I think it should have all been done. It should be classed as a Tottenham player now, and we then wait and see, because I'm just baffled by it. I really am. But I do wonder whether there's more ramifications for Nottingham Forest than there is for us.
Yeah, it really, I agree with you, though. I actually had always at least assumed that once you trigger a release clause, it's pretty much out of that club's hands. There's not really much they can do other than usher him out the door. And of course, it's more on the player. That's what I thought. The player can technically deny, the leaving. He can say, no, I actually don't want to go. And then the thing is over. But it looks like Gibbs-White, from what we've heard, is happy to come to Tottenham Hotspur. It's just Marinakis, I guess, is defying, like I said, maybe the rules and I guess all the principles and all the things we thought were true when it comes to transfers. But we'll be discussing him again, and we'll be discussing some other people as well. Just going to quickly welcome some people in, but then I do want to make the best use of these guys' time, who are giving up an hour of their evening tonight to help us out over here. And we have Jason Bell, saying big up all. If Sonny goes to LAFC, will he be having a scrap with Hugo? I did find that. I was like, are we sure it's not LA Galaxy? You know, is he happy to really join back up with Hugo? I find that funny as well, Jason. Good to see Fazzy Radfar. Thank you for the support, my friend. Tartan Spurs as well, our man up in Scotland. Good to see you. Alpesh Patel, always good to see you, sir. We also have Paul Brown, and I'm also seeing a Bobby K in the house as well. Alpesh, yeah, it feels like nothing has changed. That's why I actually decided not to go live on Tuesday, because I just was like, listen, I feel like we're just going to be repeating all the same things that we said the last Tuesday, and we were struggling to, find anything to really talk about on the last Tuesday. But I do feel like some things have developed, especially in the sunny space of things. So that's what we'll probably dive into the most. And then when you're only a couple of days away from the new preseason games, you at least have something to talk about there. So I think we'll have enough for this evening. But yeah, I was a little frustrated on Tuesday, Alpesh, by the lack of movement. Good to see Ian Ferguson, Terry Wright, Keith Edwards joining us this evening. And then Dermatron saying big up lads in the panel. First big up to Dave. My thoughts are with you and your family. Morgan Gibbs-White will happen. Looking forward to the doubleheader on Saturday. Come on, you Spurs. Soren, you and Dermatron were, our faithful men of the Europa League, saying it will happen. Nobody stress. It's getting over the line. Do you feel that way with Morgan Gibbs-White? Might as well just skip to that, right now. Do you think it's going to happen? No need to stress about it. It will eventually get done. Are you one of those people, or are you kind of, a little bit doubtful?
I am a little bit doubtful. I do think it will get done, because I think it was so close to being done. Kind of look at it in a few different ways. Part of me sits here and wonders, are Forest stalling because it happened so quick that they need to get a replacement in?
Yeah.
Is it a case of, no, they're not going to sell, doesn't matter what happens? Or is it a case of, we did do something wrong? Because that can be the only three kind of things that are holding it up. Because if we wanted him, it'd already be ours. So it has to be that either Forest don't want to sell him and they're doing everything that they can not to, which then becomes a legal matter, because surely the FA or PFA or whatever the clusters should be pushing this through if there's no legal matters. Or maybe it's just a case of maybe Gibbs-White don't want to do it. Maybe we're not here. There's something that we're not hearing. There's got to be, but part of me says yes, it will definitely get done. And then there's always that little niggle. It's like two little people on your shoulder. It's going to get done. It's going to get done. It's going to get done. Look, we're going to know by the end of the transfer window. We'll know whether it's signed or not.
I just thought of two images.
But
Thought of two images of Gibbs-White with a halo over his head and one with devil horns as well, on both of your shoulders. Luke, I mean, where do you stand? Do you think it's going to happen? And then maybe just something that Soren brought up there. Does Gibbs-White eventually have to force the initiative and just tell Marinakis, listen, man, I just need you to push this through? Does he have to start taking some initiative?
Yeah, I think there will be a deadline set on it, because Spurs can't keep going into this unless they are certain the deal gets done. And that's the one target, because I've accused Spurs of in the past kind of going for options 4, 5, and 6 because 1 and 2 is a little bit too difficult. So if they've said this is the guy and they're willing to wait until this, but they know it's going to get over the line, then we wait till the end, then that's what we'll do. But yeah, I feel like there's two separate issues here, and it seems to be being blurred into one. So obviously I'm not pretending that I know all the legalities of everything, but Spurs have met the release clause, which has been well documented, and now Nottingham Forest believe that there's obviously an illegal approach there of some sort. So that's one issue. But then Forest refusing to release Morgan Gibbs-White is a separate issue that obviously doesn't involve Spurs. And if you have to be very, very certain on these sorts of things that something untoward has been done, because if this transfer is held up and there's no proof that it gets done, Tottenham could also sue Forest, and so could Morgan Gibbs-White, and that could end up setting them back a hell of a lot of money. Because let's just say that we go and we spend £70 million on someone else, we have authority to turn around and sue them to say, we got our man, this was the cost, we want you to contribute, and it could end up costing them a hell of a lot of money, and there can't be any certainty that unless they've physically got emails, which do you know what I mean? Is a whole strange one to go down. But for me at this moment in time, Morgan Gibbs-White has done exactly what I want from him. I want him to go and train. I want him to be the professional player, because what I don't want in 2 years' time when City come calling for him is he does the same thing to us. So I'm happy with the way that he's acted. However, it may get to a situation where you kind of go, right, we had this release clause that's been met. It's been 2.5 weeks now. Like, we need to sort something out, sort of thing. I think the whole personal issue as well has come into it, and I would hope that both sides have been respectful on that. But yeah, I think there has to be, as I say, unless it's 100% that's the guy, we're definitely going to get him. I feel like there has to be some sort of time period where we go, look, we need to start looking elsewhere now, because, as I say, it can't rumble on. We can't be missing out on other people because we might or may not get Gibbs-White over the line.
Just a quick follow-up back to you, Luke, just because King Hoddle's in here. Good to see you, King Hoddle. Appreciate you. And good to see Stefan Blois as well joining us. But King Hoddle saying Gibbs-White being professional or just being weak. Look at what Kane's done. Look what Isak is doing. Do you agree with that perspective of King Hoddle, or do you feel a little bit differently about that when players forced out?
So, for instance, the thing that everyone's saying is that he should hand in a transfer request now. In theory, he's already done that in terms of he's accepted a contract at another club. So he's already said that he's willing to go. It's not like he's sitting there saying, oh, no, I'll stay. I'm absolutely fine. He's accepted a contract at another club. Now, that, if anything, that is more saying that he wants to leave than handing in a transfer request, because the transfer request, you're relying on a certain team to come in or a certain contract to be offered. He's already done that. So in my eyes, he's almost got it perfect in terms of he's already put his intentions out there. Without, when you hand in transfer requests, you get rid of the ability to have your bonuses paid, etc. So he's done nothing wrong. So for me, he's done exactly what he should. However, as I said, if Spurs may be saying, we know it's going to go through, give us a couple more weeks. So that might be an instruction on our end. However, as I said, if Spurs turn around and say, look, we're only going to wait till, I don't know, let's just say Monday. We're only going to wait till Monday, and then it will come down to him whether he forces that move. So you kind of, unfortunately, in these sort of situations, for me, you kind of have to wait to what happens before you can decide how he's acted. Because, as I say, there's no point in kicking up a massive fuss if everybody and all parties are in agreement that actually within a week or so, when Forest, for instance, get a few players over the line, they're just going to accept it and it will all go through. So, yeah, it's, as I say, you've got to realise that when you're signing a player, if they act a certain way, they may do that to your club. So it's a bit of an in-between one, really.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I think it's all right, everybody asking for him to play up and go on strike or hand transfer. But then, like you say, he just does that to us, and then we'll slate him off if he does it to us. So I think he's doing it the right way. Look, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But we all remember was it Berahino, when, you know, he turned up at the training ground or the ground to do his medical, and it was like, yeah, we're not signing you. You know, that we don't want that. To me, he's showing he's a professional footballer, and look, he wants to move, but like he'll know that if it doesn't go through, he's got to play with these players. He's got to stand in front of those fans and play his football. You don't want to be upsetting them. Now, to me, going back to the question in the sense of, do I think it'll happen? The fact that he's not been so awkward and so pushy and so blasé about it all kind of maybe makes you think that there is some understanding that it's either done or it will get done. And he's quite happy to actually be professional and do what he's got to do and just carry on. And, you know, it will get sorted out. But personally, like you say, Luke, I think he's been a proper professional, and that's what I want to see from a player.
Do we feel like he's a very particularly unique player in that there isn't just another guy out there that we could just go after? Like, I saw a rumor today, and again, I don't read too much into the rumors these days, but I did see a rumor that Harvey Elliott is potentially like a backup option in case the Morgan Gibbs-White situation doesn't work out. I find Harvey Elliott to be a very different player to Gibbs-White. I think what makes Gibbs-White unique in the fact that he's kind of a bit industrial, robust, knows how to kind of get stuck in as well as also play like a number 10. And don't really always think of, a lot of guys out there that maybe possess both. There are a lot of guys, maybe like a Madison, who are kind of that maverick style midfielder, but don't necessarily, like to maybe work as hard off of the ball. That being said, I feel like Madison's actually improved a lot on that in the last season. I think he actually showed that he can become that type of player. But do we feel like there are no other Gibbs-Whites out there? There's not another player that's especially similar. Is that why we should hold out and try to get this over the line no matter what?
Yeah, as I
Soren
say,
or
I
Luke,
think
yeah.
I think it just depends on whether we've identified him as the absolute one. Because if, as I
Yeah.
say, if we go and get a fourth and fifth choice, then everyone's going to turn around and say, why have we gone for a fourth and fifth choice and not the first choice? So, as a fan, it's frustrating, but it is what it is. Yes, I do think that not just player profile. This is 20. He's 25, so he's Premier League. He's got the experience. He's played for England. He's been a captain at Forest on a few occasions. So there's so many different factors that you could say, do you know what Spurs are missing here? We've got a coach that is probably going to be flexible. He can play in a number of positions. I could see him playing as an 8, as a 10, possibly even off the left if required. So in terms of meeting all of them criterias, I think there's very few players out there that are able to be able to. And also, I also think that he's got a higher ceiling than he's currently got. And I think if Frank comes in and is able to be in maybe a better, more attacking team, he's able to showcase it.
Yeah.
So yes, I completely agree. I think all of the alternatives out there, they don't offer everything he does. Now, not saying he's far better than all of the alternatives, but in terms of player profile, in terms of leadership, in terms of experience, as you said, having that grit, the players that seem to be coming in are probably more 10s as opposed to being an attacking 8, if you like.
No, I agree with that. And actually, the part that I really like that you mentioned is that he's kind of been playing in a defensive side. And not saying we'll be playing Nuno ball, with Thomas Frank, but we know that Thomas Frank is very defensive oriented to an extent, and he wants his players to work hard off of the ball. And bringing in someone like Gibbs-White, who already has a lot of experience, doing that under Nuno, I think actually would go a very long way, maybe compared to someone like Harvey Elliott, who's played in these very attack-minded teams, his entire time, then having to learn to sit in a defensive shape would be a little bit different to what he's probably been used to. Whereas Gibbs-White, that's kind of what he's been doing for a long time since playing for teams like Wolves and playing for Nottingham Forest. Dermatron saying if it doesn't get done, I could do a show in my boxers. I actually probably imagine you've done already a show in your boxers before because it's all top up. Yeah, Dermatron. Not we're usually showing the legs on these streams now, are we? So there are probably plenty of times you've gotten away with probably just having a pair of boxers on the bottom. And he's also saying I am joking, by the way. I think we definitely got it, Tron. But appreciate that you are confident that this is getting over the line. I like to see people that maybe aren't as it's not like it's keeping me up at night, the Morgan Gibbs-White situation, but I do feel like, every time that I wake up in the morning, instead of checking, the world news or anything, I'm going straight to Twitter to see if anything has, developed. And it's been a little bit frustrating. That feels like it's, at least right now, a bit dead in the water. Just one more point on this. And I think it was just because I like what Rain Man has to say, and it's going to come to you, Soren. He's saying, I'm afraid you're wrong. The problem is Marinakis. You can't be reasonable with unreasonable people. Morgan Gibbs-White needs to take this dispute to the next level. Essentially, Marinakis is just so out there, so unordinary, that you kind of have to, I guess, do something you really don't want to do if you're going to get this deal done. He's not going to play by the rules.
Look, I fully agree with that statement. But I just think, look, the first few days, a week, whatever, we had all the noise. This is happening. Well, there hasn't been an official complaint, and that there hasn't been a lot of things happen. And we then got told that Morgan Gibbs-White has handed a transfer request in, and then he hasn't, and this has happened, that has happened, he hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. I just think there is so much speculation about what isn't happening, that it's just a case of, look, nobody really knows what is going on. That's the problem, and it's like a lot of things. But look, let's just jump back a little bit. Do you remember the Porro's situation when we tried to sign Porro and it took the whole January window because the other team didn't want to sell because they wanted this and they wanted that and they wanted to get this in place and that in place. And what's to say this isn't exactly the same situation that I think the fact that we're not pushing it and we're not making a lot of noise kind of tells you a couple of things. That one, the club is either very confident of it happening, in which case that this is why there isn't all this, and maybe that's why Gibbs-White hasn't handed a transfer request in. Maybe there is something, an agreement behind the scenes. Maybe we do have to pay a little bit more money. Maybe we have breached some contracts, so therefore we cannot push it. There are a lot of stipulations that could and couldn't be happening, and everybody that's putting all this information out, this news out, probably nobody actually knows the real truth about what has or hasn't happened.
I agree.
Regarding as to whether there's another player out there that we should just go for. Look, my thought on this matter is that if Thomas Frank has come in and he has said, I want that player, that's the player I want, and that is my number one choice of player that I want, then why not just keep trying to get that same player? Now, if it becomes an apparent, that maybe Frank has turned around and said, look, if we don't get Gibbs-White, I've got Bentancur, I've got Basuma, I've got Papsar. I'm happy to go with that until we can get him in the January transfer or next year. But, like I think Luke said it in a few minutes ago, how many times have we gone for a player and then ended up with second or third or fourth choice? And then all the fans complain that we didn't get the player because we didn't wait or we didn't pay a little bit more or whatever. Now, to me, this is the perfect, we're actually sitting there and hoping we're going to get the player that it seems Thomas Frank wants. And none of us are happy, or a lot of the fan base aren't happy. You move on and get a player that wasn't as, didn't fit that the way Thomas Frank wants or the player that he wants. And then again, we've done wrong. So I don't know. I just think it's one of those that, what are we, halfway through? Are we even halfway through the window? Let's just wait and see. It's not the end of the world if he hasn't signed by the end of next week even.
We probably forget that the window ends on September 1st. We sometimes think the window almost ends at the first game of the Premier League season.
It's August something this year, isn't it? So it's like just before the Prem starts. So
yeah,
look, it wouldn't surprise me with Gibbs. I mean, I think the bigger issue with the Morgan Gibbs-White is, why has it ceased all the other transfers happening? Why is it suddenly gone dead? All this talk about we've got money and we're going to get this player and we've got, I told you, what I'd heard, and it's just gone dead. Everything's gone dead. And that's the bit that concerns me more. It's not the fact that Morgan Gibbs-White isn't signed yet, or will he sign, won't he sign? It's what's happened with the rest of the targets we were going for.
Well, it takes about 5 to 10 days, I think, to replace a lost or stolen credit card. And that was my theory, is that someone just got a hold of Levy's credit card. He canceled it, and it just takes a few days for it to get replaced. So maybe that's what's happened. Soren, he's finally got it.
Again, I know that was a joke, but this is what infuriates me. Everybody's telling us that Levy's got nothing to do with transfers, but yet it's all Levy's fault that it hasn't gone through. Well, you can't have it both ways. It's either Levy's fault or it isn't. We've gone on, and the rumours I heard was it was all Lang who was doing these quick deals. Well, if it hasn't gone through and something's gone wrong, then blame him, not Levy this time. It wouldn't be a day without supporting Tottenham, would it?
No. I think we've covered enough on the Gibbs-White situation, and I imagine nothing will change, by the next time that we all speak. So apologies if we repeat the same questions. But let's move on to the Sonny situation, which we were, I think, given that breaking news, apparently he's staying. That was according to some, I think, Korean sports ITK from, I think, around like the July 4th period. I remember Dave and I did like an emergency recording about that. But now, all of a sudden, we're getting the different news from Gary Jacob. He's saying Son Heung-Min is increasingly likely to leave Spurs this summer. There's an offer from LAFC. Apparently, Spurs have received an offer from them, and there's renewed interest again from Saudi Arabia. I'll go to you on this one, Luke, and then we'll, of course, get Soren in as well. Do you think Sonny will, in fact, leave Spurs this summer? But also, as well, do you think Sonny should be the one deciding whether he stays or goes, or is that more of a Thomas Frank decision?
No, I personally, I think Son should decide whether he stays or goes. However, what role he gets when he stays, or if he stays, is entirely up to Frank. So it's not going to be a case of you stay and you'll just start because you've been here 10 years and you're a legend. It'll be a case of, okay, if you want to stay, you stay. But if Frank decides that you're going to be a rotation player, then that's what you'll be. So I think we should give him what our expectations are this season of him. And then he then makes a decision from that. Loyalty is very difficult in football, and to be around for 10 years. And also, we're not talking about a lot of the players that we've kind of had that have been around that long. Your Dyers, your Davies, virtually always sort of split opinion for like half their career, whereas Son has been absolutely incredible for pretty much his whole tenure. So I think that he should definitely be given the option to. Obviously, that doesn't say that we will say to him, yeah, we're happy for you, or you make the decision. But if someone comes in and let's say Saudi Arabia offers 70 million, then obviously we're going to turn around and go, we're accepting that, and it's still up to you to decide whether you stay or go, sort of thing. So he's got a year left. It's entirely up to him, really, in terms of, we could turn around and say we want to sell you, and he could say, no, do you know what, I'm happy on the contract I'm on for one more year. But I think it makes sense for all parties. Personally, I think he's come in, he's won the trophy, he's been here 10 years, he's obviously his ability is declining, unfortunately. I think it makes perfect sense for him to leave, but I think he should make that decision. But again, that shouldn't be, oh, if he decides to stay, he has to start. Like, for instance, the captaincy question that's been asked, he's not turned around and said, well, if he stays, he's the captain, which is obviously something that people thought he may say. So that's where I stand on it.
I agree with your loyalty point. I've made that as well in the past with Harry Kane and Sonny to an extent, where, there was Luka Modric, Gareth Bale. The moment that Real Madrid came calling, they were great players that made me, in fact, a Spurs fan, but they, took that chance when it was given to them. Whereas who's to say that there wasn't at one point maybe an offer in the past for Harry Kane or an offer in the past for someone like Sonny, and then they just decided, you know what, I'm really liking my life here. I like, the journey. I want to win that trophy with Spurs instead of winning 5, 6, 7 trophies with someone else. I think, that loyalty point should be rewarded to some extent. And I actually am in the camp that I think Sonny, he only is going to probably be here for another season or two anyways. So I think he should be allowed to decide whether he stays or goes. But of course, a lot of people as well think about that £200,000 a week wage that he's on, or something around that mark, and they feel like that could go to someone else. What do you think, Soren? Is he actually going to leave this summer? Like Rain Man was saying, black or red? Is he staying or going? And should he be the one that's deciding, or should it be Thomas Frank's decision?
You know what? I am absolutely torn on this one. I love Sonny to bits. I think he's the epitome of a professional footballer that the likes we just don't see anymore. He's stayed loyal to the club, and he's given everything to this club, for 10 years. And when Kane left, he stayed, and his determination was to win a cup with Spurs, and he's done that. And I would love to see him, as a football fan, I would love to see him stay at Tottenham until the moment he just can't walk anymore. Where his legs have gone and he's old and grey, and he wants to go back to South Korea maybe and live, with the family or whatever. And until that day, I think he should be a Tottenham player. But there is another side to me that kind of looks at it and thinks, I want him to go as a winner. I want him to go while he's still kind of got something left in the tank. There are many a fan out there for Tottenham that are already turning on him. They're already given up on him. And I don't want to see it get toxic with him. The last thing I want is for him to be at this club and the fans kind of don't like him anymore. They just want... His legs aren't quite gone yet. I don't agree with that. I don't think he's got full 90 minutes anymore. I agree in that sense. But I think he can still do a job for us. Maybe not as the first name on the team sheet every single time. But look, I don't know. I'm torn.
What do you make of these kind of comments? I've heard Dave make this comment before, Soren, that when Hugo Lloris kind of was staying on and on and on, people actually started to turn on Lloris kind of in his final years at the club, even though he was an absolute legend. So people are kind of suggesting that, I think, a little bit here. Paul's saying, I love Sonny. He's a legend. Unfortunately, he's washed. Facts are facts. I don't want him to become a passenger. I'm fine with Sonny deciding, unless that performance against Reading is what we can expect this season. If he does leave LAFC, it seems the obvious choice, but I can't watch him at his current decline. So that's kind of in the lines of what David
But you
was
see,
saying.
this is it. I mean, kind of look at it and think, now we're going to see a slightly different system and a different manager and a different way of playing. Could he be the player that we want for another season or two? Could he, be that maybe impact sub or start games and play 60 minutes? Look, this is the thing. I don't think he's not the player he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. We know that, but maybe the system was just too much for him under Ange. Maybe the captaincy is too big a weight on his shoulders. There's a lot of ifs and buts. Now, I agree that he certainly hasn't been the player we're used to seeing. I don't think he's washed up. I think he's still got something to offer us, but it's probably not the same Sonny that we've been used to seeing. Maybe we're going to have to use him slightly differently. Maybe it is just a sub, but I think the question of, is it his choice or is it Frank's choice? I think it's a little bit of both, because I think Sonny and Frank probably need to sit down and have a real honest chat and say, look, you're either going to be, you are in my thoughts, you are going to play for this team, or no, you're not. I really think you should move on. And then it's up to Sonny. If he says, no, I really, I don't care whether I'm playing or not, well, that's his choice. But I do think there's a lot of questions and answers need to be done between them two. And look, I hope he stays. I hope he has a really good season and maybe leaves on a free, because he deserves it. I think he does deserve to leave on a free, as long as, he does give us something back. But I just think he's knackered. I just think the injuries and the playing style that he was asked to play for the last 2 years, I just think it's knackered him. And maybe a bit of a rest and a different system and a different manager, and we could just see a rejuvenated Sonny for a season.
I really appreciate the support, Tin Man. I'll get to this in just a second, and also thank you for the support from earlier, Dermatron. Just to you, Luke, that point that we were making about Hugo Lloris, right? Like, is that happening with Sonny right now, where we're watching the decline in front of our eyes, and we should just stop it here, let him end as like maybe Soren was saying, let him end as a winner? Do you kind of subscribe to that, or do you feel a little bit differently?
No, 100%. I've recently done something for YouTube. I've done a YouTube video, and I looked across Sonny's stats across his whole career. They're just unbelievable. Like, I know Sonny's a good player, but I look back at the stats to be in the top 20 for goals and assists in the Premier League ever is just ridiculous. The goals that he's got. And when I looked at all of the people that were in these goals and assists, they was all around teams that were built around them. Your Salahs, your Omris. This team was never built around Son. It was built around Kane, and it did highlight some of the good characteristics in Son. But Son was the one that was having to work hard to track back, playing left wing back on occasions under Poch, etc. So we definitely do underestimate him. The numbers that he gets, even only 2 seasons ago, he got 27 goal involvements in 34 games. And also, I'm one of the ones that I agree with both sides here. I think in game, has very much been like a Brennan Johnson type, where in game he's not looked great. However, he got the same goals and assists in the Premier League as Eze last year, and everybody has been going mad to sign Eze. So it's one of them. I completely agree with Soren. I think that in a system where he's going to be closer to the goal, in a system where we're going to be better defensively, so hopefully he doesn't have to work as hard. And he's going to be closer to the goal. And that's what Sonny is. He's a raw finisher. And someone used an example. I think it was actually on YouTube. I can't remember who it was. But if we was to go long, if you was to have Romero playing one of these unbelievable balls over the top, Solanke wins a header and someone's running onto that ball, is there any player in that squad you'd rather have other than Sonny? And the answer is no, because he's one of the best finishers that the league's ever seen. So if we can get a player that's rested, that's not being used all the time, that's closer to the goal, I think he can be a weapon this year. However, he's not going to be scoring 17, 20 goals like that. So I understand both sides, but I just think that we crave for loyalty. We want players to stay here. We want players to want to be here. We've got a player that stayed here for 11, 10 years. and at the first sign of trouble, we're getting rid of him, when actually the numbers, as I said, tally up to what Eze produced.
I mean, that picture that you described, of the long ball from Romero, the flick on from Solanke, and then exactly, you can almost picture it, just Sonny running onto it. And who else would you rather have? You're absolutely right. Tin Man, thank you for being patient, and thank you for the support, my friend. Saying, guys, issue is that we were miles behind the top six last year. All of those clubs have massively improved their squad. We are falling so far behind. It is very worrying. What are we waiting for? I want, both of you guys to come off the back of this. What I would say is I felt like just by sacking Ange Postecoglou a couple of weeks after we won the trophy and everything, we already were going to be on the back foot this summer, because we had to bring in the new manager. The new manager has to have a look at the majority of the players in the squad. He has to get a sense of the lay of the land, what he has available to him, what he thinks he needs, what maybe he doesn't need. And that is just automatically going to be on the back foot compared to these other managers who have actually had a season under their belt with their teams. Enzo Maresca at Chelsea, you have Arne Slot at Liverpool, you have other managers, even to a degree, you could look at Ruben Amorim, already has a head start in comparison to the likes of Thomas Frank. By bringing in a new manager this summer, I think we always were going to be a little bit slower in getting things over the line than the other clubs. And Spurs historically have already been a club that seems to kind of take their time and maybe aren't as ruthless about getting deals over the line anyways, compared to other clubs. I just think we set ourselves up for this situation, to be honest, Tin Man, just by bringing in a new manager this summer. Not saying it was the wrong decision, but it was going to have its consequences. And I think one of them is going to be, he's not going to know every single position that he needs to, try to beef out, or which ones he needs to improve on. But Soren and Luke, I mean, what do you guys have to say to Tin Man on this? I mean, what are we doing? Is his question.
I think look, we've said it for a long time now that we're already behind the top six, never mind the fact of how some of them are strengthening now. But look, let's not forget, Thomas Frank wanted 2 or 3 or 4 of our players at Brentford. He was Brentford, wasn't it? Or is it? But yeah, it was Brentford, wasn't it? He's come. Yeah. I suddenly got Bournemouth in the back of my head and thought, oh, damn, I've fucked up again. But no, look, I mean, Thomas Frank wanted a few of our players at Brentford. So I think he'd probably looked at our squad and thought, you know what, it's not a bad squad. There are players in there that I'm quite happy with. There's 1 or 2 that I want to look at. And look, in hindsight, I would argue with anybody, had the Morgan Gibbs-White transfer gone through, we would have seen action, or we would have had another 1 or 2 players in by now. I just think something has just knocked us off for some reason. I don't know whether, like we say, whether we did cock up and we're just being very careful now, or, something's happened. But look, it's scary when you see what some of the time in Liverpool and, Chelsea, where the hell is this money coming from? All of a sudden we see Newcastle probably going to lose Isaac and who they're going to sign.
Everyone's just saying no to Newcastle. That's kind of, they're trying to get deals done. It's just everyone's saying no.
Well, yeah. And what, we're all sat here saying, well, why aren't we signing anybody? Well, look, the 2 signings that in theory we were going to make, we didn't know anything about till the point of them signing. So what's to say we haven't been in the same situation where there's been 1 or 2 players we've approached and they've said no. So it hasn't gone any further. But it is alarming that, we are this far in and we're about to go on a tour, and basically the only new player we have got in is Kudos.
Well, if you're starting to get a little bit panicked, Soren, I think a lot of people will get panicked, because normally you're very calm.
I'm not so much panicked, because I do think Thomas Frank does need a little bit of time to see these players and see whether they're going to work and things like that. I don't want to turn around and say I've got faith in the club to get exactly what we need to get done, because when have we ever got, we've signed a couple of players in the past and we thought we were going to go on and we haven't. But I don't think it's panic time yet. I think we should have done more. I hoped we'd have done more, but I'm not panicking fully yet. I think there's enough time to, yes, it's stupid that we haven't got the players in early, but it's not the end of the world.
What about you, Luke? Tin Man's point, we finished 17th. What are we doing?
I'm going to map this all out because I've already perfectly put it together in my head, right? So Morgan Gibbs-White was expected to be signed. And then after that, it was all about getting rid of all of the deadwood. And that's what I think it is. You're completely right. It's been mentioned in the chat, and you also mentioned it. When you keep bringing in new managers, they need to look at new things. So, for instance, I could see a Richarlison working really well in the Frank system if he's fit. However, is he a Postecoglou player? I'm not so sure. I think he fits Frank slightly better. So he then needs to come in, and the players that you thought, well, actually, let's say Bentancur. A lot of people said we should be getting rid of Bentancur. Frank mentioned him in his very first interview, said, I like this player. So he's going to have to come in and give everybody a chance. I think it's poor squad planning because you shouldn't have 6 left wingers who you could argue are all just as good as each other. And none of them are probably good enough to be your main starter in a Champions League campaign. So my personal thing is I think the Morgan Gibbs-White and the Kudos was first team players, improve, go and spend the money, get it done. We then start looking at where we can get rid of players. So let's say if Basuma goes out the door, we then bring in Palhinha. Let's use that as an example. We get rid of a Solomon, we get rid of a Richie. Oh, now let's look at bringing in a forward. That's what I think it is. That makes perfect sense. However, football's never perfect sense. So I could be completely barking up the wrong tree and we're all just sitting on our hands waiting for Morgan Gibbs-White for no real reason. But that's what I think it is. I think it's just poor squad planning. We go back to talking about Sonny, talking about Kane. We had Kane here for 15 years and it took us a season after he left to bring in a replacement. We've got Sonny here, who we could all see there was going to be some sort of a decline. And we're waiting 2 years, 3 years too long before we bring in a replacement. This is the problem that we sort of have, and we have done for a very, very long period of time. We've got a bloated squad, but the quality is not there. And this is what I kept saying before we signed Kudos, was that I'm sick and tired of buying squad players, which is what we seem to do. We need to go out and improve the 11, and then the players that are in the 11 become the squad players. Therefore, you make your team better. If we get Morgan Gibbs over the line, that's 2 players that have improved the 11. Palhinha has been linked. That's 3. Improving 3 of your first 11 is a pretty decent sort of window for most teams. I know there are some exceptions, i.e. Liverpool, who looks like they're going to get 5 of some sort, but to get 3 and improve the 11 is something we haven't done. So there is baby steps. I completely understand that. We were miles behind the top 6. However, if you was to compare the tactics and Frank coming in and improving that low level, to be honest, and bringing it to a higher level, then if Newcastle lose Isaac, you then start Aston Villa, who are they potentially going to have to lose someone because of PSR, etc. So I do completely agree with that, but I think that this isn't the end of the window as far as I'm concerned. I think we need to get rid of some players out, and then hopefully that will mean we start looking at new players in.
Yeah, I'm on a similar boat with you, and I think that's part of our answer. I think Tin Man is that if you keep hiring and sacking managers, I think you're just automatically going to be a little bit behind the other clubs. And Spurs, like Soren has mentioned, as well, have never been a club that usually get everything that we want in a transfer window anyway. So we're just automatically just going to be on the back foot this window. But to a degree, you really feel like, maybe we should, I don't know, maybe just the other big signing that I really hope that we try to get done is maybe potentially another midfielder, but I'm actually really just crying out for a left back. That's always seems to be Spurs' problems, is we seem to take years to bring in that extra fullback that we've always needed. I think Destiny Udogie desperately needs some sort of competition. I know Jet Spence will offer it, but there's nobody else that I can think of other than Jet Spence that we have to compete with Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie. We need to get a move on.
Also, it's also forgotten about, but Liverpool got a brand new manager in under a brand new regime. And he went, do you know what? I just need to look at all of this before I start. And then all of a sudden, they've won the league and he's signed 5 players because he's worked out where he needs to get better. I'm not saying we're going to not make more signings and then go and make 5 unbelievable signings next year. But unfortunately, you do need to do that. And consistently, we've gone from a completely different playing style to a completely different playing style, which then for like Porro, for instance, everyone was going, he can't be a right back. He's not good enough defensively. Because we had a 5 at the back manager, then brought him in, then went 4 at the back. So they do need to have a little look. There are certain players where you could say you should already know whether he's good enough because we've seen it and he's not good enough. But I think that's part of it. You've got to start trimming down the squad. And I think that's part of also the reporters that keep saying we need to sell to buy, sell to buy. I think that's just from a numbers point of view, because look at what we've done with Reguilon. Was paying him 60, 70 grand a week to just sit there. He wasn't registered. He wasn't playing. And that's just terrible. So I think that's part of it, unfortunately, which is terrible for us fans.
I think that Liverpool point you made is spot on. Like, even Ange Postecoglou, he gutted the squad, to be fair to him, but he still, took a while to get rid of someone like Davinson Sanchez, Eric Dyer, even though he probably did want to get rid of those guys. He still gave them, some games here and there to see what they could do and what they could offer. And I think Thomas Frank, as a new manager as well, is, in a sense, just has to do the same thing. He has to get a whole lay of the whole picture of what he feels like he needs to change and what he thinks his best team will look like. And we're just going to be on the back foot, unfortunately, Tin Man. I really appreciate the support, by the way, my man. And thank you as well to everybody in here. Sonny J, very, very nice comments as well from yourself. I appreciate it. And then also Fazzy Radfar saying, wishing Dave's dad a happy, speedy recovery and a return home. I think he's going to be in the hospital for a couple of weeks, but he's definitely gotten some good news recently from what I can tell of Fazzy Radfar. So I think Dave is nowhere near as stressed as he might have been maybe a day or two ago, which is very good news. And like I said, I think he should be back sometime next week with us. So thank you, Fazzy Radfar. I really appreciate it, my man. But we'll get this moving on to, I think now, the João Palhinha rumors. Sources believe there's a strong possibility that Spurs will be able to reach an agreement for Palhinha, but they may need to sell one of their existing players first. I think, i.e. Basuma or someone like that. That came from Mike McGrath of the Daily Telegraph. My question to you, Soren, is João Palhinha even the right midfielder for this Thomas Frank system? Because when I think of him when he was in the Premier League, he was one of the best ball winning, kind of just monster powerhouse defensive midfielders, it just in the Premier League in general, but even in European football. But he never really struck me as like the Adam Wharton type that you can also, really dictate play, be able to switch, the play, be able to really progress moves from the deep areas. I kind of just thought of him as that, bully type defensive midfielder that would just sit in front of the center backs to protect them, but not much more than that. So my question is, do we maybe need someone that's a bit more multifaceted, someone that can also win the ball, but then be able to dictate the play as well? Where do you stand on João Palhinha? Is he the right player? Do we need something better? What do you think?
Quite simply, get him signed. Stop messing about. Look, I wanted him a year, 2 years ago. I just think whether he's the right player for us or not, I think he's going to come in, he'll do a job, and it's the experience, it's the leadership within him that I think we're missing. And look, he might not play every game, but I think he'll play quite a lot, and I think he would be absolutely perfect for this team for a year or two. Champions League, get him in there, sit in front of our defense, just make it a little bit more solid. I just think it's a no-brainer. And look, in this day and age, I mean, what they're quoting, is it 20 million for him? It's not a lot of money for a player. I know there's
probably like a loan option.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably no sell-on value to him. I just think it's the type of player that could be absolutely instrumental to us possibly going on and winning a domestic cup, doing well in Europe. I just think it's a no-brainer. I think is perfect.
My kind of question on this, and again, Luke can come on this, and then I do want Soren to come back in on this. But like when I was, as a Yank, we often do love to look at the stats, but I've tried not to do that as much, sometimes. But this is what he was excellent at, right? Defensive. This was his last season at Fulham. I'm not looking at the Bayern stats because he barely played at Bayern. So I just don't think you can really work with a whole lot there. But when he was at Fulham in his last season there, which I can recall was probably his best season at Fulham, that's probably what even earned him that move. But he was like the best defensive midfielder pretty much in European football and in the Premier League. But then when you look at kind of his passing numbers, like really not a whole lot to rave about, to be perfectly honest. And that's what I kind of remembered him as. So it's almost like the stats, in my opinion, match up with a little bit of the seeing eye test, where it's not like he's bad on the ball, but he wasn't anything exceptional. What he was exceptional at was winning the ball. So where do you stand on Palhinha, Luke? Like, is he the type of player that we need? Is that all we need for this Frank midfield? Is just that bully type midfielder, and then just let the other guys, dictate the play? That's his sole responsibility.
No, I've agreed with everything Soren said, but I don't think he's the perfect player for this system personally. I think he's a good player, and I think if he come in, he will do a good job. However, I think that we need a more of a ball progressing midfielder who's able to get on the ball and dictate it a little bit. If we was under Ange, then 100% Palhinha is the perfect player for him in terms of he's going to be on his own. He's got to be a destroyer. It's winning the ball and giving it to the better players, basically a Wilson Palacios type, 100%. However, in this system, with Frank, I think we will be more solid in defensive areas anyway because he's a better defensive coach. I think we'll have more bodies in and around that area and they won't be as isolated. So similar to when Bentancur and Basuma towards the end of the season, neither are 6 or defensive midfielder destroyer types, if you like. But when they play together, you've got the additional cover there. So therefore, you don't need that single destroyer type player in there. So as I say, if we sign him, I think it's a good sign-in. I think it's an area that we need to strengthen. However, for me, I would personally look for a more Douglas Luiz sort of type who's able to operate in defensive areas, but also be able to play the ball out. That would be my target. But as I say, if we're targeting these level of players, then I'm happy because this is players that improve the 11 and this is what we need to do. So yeah, as I say, good player. I think if he come in, he'll definitely do a job. However, I would go for a player that's a little bit better on the ball.
Funny that you mentioned Douglas Luiz, and I don't want to go back to the Morgan Gibbs-White situation, but Douglas Luiz is another player that's, forcing the move apparently with Juventus. Apparently he didn't show up to the training camp for Juventus, and they're now punishing him for it with some fines and stuff. So it's almost what we wish Morgan Gibbs-White was doing in the case of Douglas Luiz. But yeah, that's just my stance on it. I'm not even sure what Thomas Frank needs. Does he need just that destroyer, perfect word for the likes of João Palhinha? Is that all he needs? It's just that guy to, sort of protect the back line, or does he need someone that can maybe do a bit more than just that? And that's just my kind of pertinent question. I'm not even sure if I have an answer for it because we don't know too much about Thomas Frank yet.
Surely the argument with that, though, Jack and Luke, is if we get a Paulinho and he sits there to break everything up that's attacking us, you've then got the likes of Maddison if he's fit, Morgan Gibbs-White if we get him in, Bergvall, he's another year older and a little bit more experienced. You've got players that can do that playmaking. You've got players that can do the work. And like I say, he might not play every game. He might not be the perfect fit for the Premiership. But against certain teams, I think we're probably going to sit back, and the more defense-minded players we have, look what's going to happen when we go against, say, Liverpool. If they get Isaac as well, or Champions League, where we've got a little bit, we go away and we've got to be defensive a little bit more. This is the type of player for me that is perfect. And he is the sort of player that I would want to come in and teach the likes of, say, Gray how to be that number 6 for future reference and that sort of holding midfielder. And that's why I think he's perfect. I mean, I get the Luiz shouts, but again, I look at him and just think, I know this, circumstances behind what's happening with him, but I don't want a player that just doesn't turn up for training because he's throwing his toys out or whatever. And I just look at players that do that and think, is he going to do that to us? Mm-hmm. Are we going to get down the line and you think, say, Real Madrid or somebody comes in, all right, I'm not turning up for training now, so sod you. And, we're all going to be sat here as fans saying, get rid of him. I just think Paulinho, look, he's probably only got 2 years left in him. But I don't know. I just think it makes sense. I really do. And I get where Luke coming from, that, maybe we want somebody a little bit more playmaker type that can pass the ball and things like that. But it kind of reminds me of the Scotty Parker and the Sandro, that you break these games up and then you give the ball back to somebody who can do something with it. And that's the sort of player I think we've missed for a long, long time.
Yeah, and as I say, like if you was to go through it, I'm not saying don't sign him. As I say, I think he will be a good signing. He just wouldn't be the top of my list. So if you've got a midfield of say a Palhinha, Morgan Gibbs-White with Maddison in front of it, that's a very good midfield in my eyes. A very good Premier League midfield. As I say, Douglas Luiz, I've seen recently about him not turning up for training, and I've just said that Morgan Gibbs-White shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, no, I completely. But it's that sort of type, João Gomez, just a player that's able to. But if he's the one that Frank's identified, if Frank thinks that a 6 and a destroyer is the exact player that he needs, then I'm all for it. I don't care about the age. I don't think it's that expensive. And as I say, I do think he will be a good player. Just for me, I'd rather there be someone there. There's a player that probably people have now started to hear about, that Arden Djari. He just looks like I don't understand it. It's like I'm watching something, but it can't quite be true, because this guy should be playing the elite of the elite. He's got you pulled up the metrics there. He's got every single metric you can possibly imagine for a 6, an 8, a 10. He just looks ridiculous. So I think we should be going for him. I understand he's not Premier League proven, but he just looks like he is on another level. So, but I just think it should be a little bit more progressive. But as I say, this is the kind of thing, again, changing manager, we can't really know exactly what he's identified. He might have come in and said, Palhinha is the guy. He's the one I want. And then if that's the case, we go and do it, because I'm sick and tired of signing players that are not managers' first choice.
No, and that's a funny thing, is that we try to, it's not like we're pretending or something, but so many of us, I remember when Ange Postecoglou first came in, we were saying like, oh, he needs this kind of player, he needs this kind of player, and we barely had even seen anything of Ange's system yet. Everyone was saying he needed that, forget his name, but that Scottish midfielder that was playing like the deep lying role for him, and it was just like, no, I mean, that guy's kind of, McGregor. It's just like, that guy's not necessarily the quality that would be able to fit into the Premier League, but everyone was crying out that was the guy that he needs to bring in. We're still figuring out exactly what Thomas Frank is, trying to build here. And even more funny with Thomas Frank is that we know how flexible he is, maybe compared to guys like Ange, right? So we don't really know what he's thinking at this moment in time of how his team will look. We still don't even know if it's going to be a back 3 or a back 4 even. The guy's kind of that much of a flexible, manager. So we're going to take a while to figure him out.
And let's not forget, with Thomas Frank, the hope is that we've got a manager in that are going to improve the players we've got. So if he improves some of our players in that midfield and things like that, then it's not, we could have a bloody good squad on our hands. It's that was the big criticism with Ange, that he didn't come in and he didn't really improve the players he had. Well, if Frank comes in and improves the players we've got, then we're not going to be a million miles away. And look, we're not going to finish 17th again. We know that. We're going to be a top 6 team, I think. So I do think he's going to come in. I do think the players we've got, he could probably do a very good job with the exact squad we've got now. But yeah, I mean, we still need to obviously improve. But I think with the manager he will get something a little bit more out of these players.
Let's just take a couple of comments, and we only have a couple of questions left. So please, everybody, smash the like button for us. Matt Barton saying, isn't Romero a deep line playmaker, but just in the center back position? The best passers don't necessarily have to be the defensive midfielder. That's a fair point, I think, from Matt. Not always is that the case. We also had as well Stevie saying we should go for Sangare just to piss off Marinakis even more. Absolutely love that. Elvis G, thank you for the support. Member for 12 months, reaching that year, saying smash all the likes, everybody subscribe or become a member. That's very, very kind of you, Elvis. And anybody that's been watching along, if you have enjoyed the show, continue to get in your comments. I'm trying my best to ask these guys the questions as well as bring yours up on screen, trying to engage with them. And if you do want to support the channel any further, do consider becoming a member, especially when the season is underway. Plenty of good perks that do come with it. Let's go to my last kind of 2 questions for you guys. Just one quickly on Matisse Tell. He spoke recently with Sky Sports, and he was asked whether Thomas Frank had spoken to him before signing for the club permanently. He's saying no, but I watched some games of last year at Brentford. I watched to get an idea of just how they play. I kind of got the impression that maybe Spurs had signed Matisse Tell without really necessarily speaking to Thomas Frank about it. Of course, I'm only speculating, but what do we think? Is this maybe a signing, as let's bring up this old conversation again, club signing instead of a manager signing? Was Matisse Tell just somebody that they were going to sign no matter what, regardless of the manager's input? And how do we feel about that? I'll go to you, Luke.
It's so strange, just so strange. I mean, if there was an obligation to buy, then obviously he's coming in similar to Danzo. He's coming in, and you haven't got a choice in the matter. But there weren't an obligation because we negotiated the contract. We negotiated the price down. So it's one of them where you go that Frank must have signed it off because otherwise football don't work like that. But then you go, but it is Spurs. So there's a very, very good possibility that someone has made a decision for no reason after not speaking to Frank. I actually think that Tell's going to have I think he's going to have a good season. I think Frank will be able to get hold of him. I think that for all the reasons that I mentioned with Son, I think that's why Tell is more of an inside forward than a winger. So is Son. I think that the closer he is to the goal is where he does his damage. It's poor because a lot of the attributes that I think are very, very good about him is not necessarily a footballer point of view. It's not a touch, a finish. It's the way that he's come in and just understands everything. He just gets it. And he's also, you can tell he's not a player that's just going to settle. He's been at Bayern, he's been at PSG, he's been at all these top clubs. He's going to demand more from himself, from everyone around him. I think he's going to have a good season. I really, really do. If he plays consistently, I think he's going to be a good player. I think if we didn't sign him, I think he's one of the ones where you'd go in a couple of years. He was at our club. We didn't even try to keep him. And all of a sudden, he's gone on and he's done this, that, and the other. So, I like him. I do think that whole situation is very, very strange. And as I said, we tried it with Spence. It absolutely didn't work. So don't ever do this again. But again, this comes down to having a philosophy, having an idea of playing. As I say, we've got two wing backs at the club, and we're playing them full back because we had a 5 at the back manager, and now we've gone to a 4 at the back. And we just need to have a clear identity. Sign the players that are going to fit the system the way we want to play, and then we sign players and we bring in managers that suit that system instead of going from a Mourinho to a Pochettino to a Postecoglou and then just going from all around the houses for me.
I love that you mentioned the Jed Spence example. Is it a bit like that, Soren, quickly? Is it a club signing?
No, I don't think it's a club signing. I think it's a no-brainer signing, to be honest with you. Look, you've got to look at it two ways. I don't for a minute believe that there hasn't been a discussion with Thomas Frank saying, is this the type of player you want? Yes. You don't then go and sign or agree with Bayern and the player doesn't want to play for Thomas Frank. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed that contract to stay. So I just think it's probably another one of those where there's probably a little bit of misunderstanding, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a discussion between Thomas Frank and Matthias Tell to say, do you want to come? Do you want to play for us? There's probably a case of, look, yeah, if he wants to stay, I want him in the squad. I want him in the team. And let's not pick anybody. Matthias Tell is a damn good player. I've got a few people that I know in Germany that are Bayern fans and things like that, and they are all pretty pissed off that he's not staying. He has talent, and look, when he first came to Tottenham, he hadn't played much, and he came into that system and played pretty quickly. And if you watched him, he was bossing some of our players about, telling them what to do and telling them to close down. He is an intelligent footballer, a young, intelligent footballer. He might not, I'm not saying he's going to be a Ballon d'Or winner, but he will be a good little player. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. I mean, why wouldn't we sign him?
Every time that someone mentions Ballon d'Or, I feel like Rio Ferdinand has ruined it after that clip of Vinicius, him saying Ballon d'Or 10,000 times. I always just laugh and chuckle to myself. Maybe he'll be saying that about Matisse Tell. Final question for you guys here. Thomas Frank on the 2 friendlies that will be happening Saturday. He said, we wanted an extra game in our schedule to give as many players as many match minutes as possible in order to put them in the best position physically. We will play 2 even, strong teams, and they will play between themselves 60 and 75 minutes, maybe even more. By the end of Saturday, 22 players will have played a lot of match minutes, and they will be in a very good place before we go on tour. Do you think I think it was a brilliant decision. I'll answer that question to get that extra game in. But do we kind of see this as potentially like a final tryout, if you will. Maybe that's not the right word, but just an opportunity for him to make some further decisions on kind of who stays, who goes. Because usually the people that end up going on the big, preseason tour to Asia are the ones that usually end up sticking around. So is this kind of the final glimpses for Frank of who he wants to keep? Go
Are
back to you,
both
Soren.
games at home, or are they both away?
One is at home behind closed doors at the training ground, and then the others, I believe, is it Kenilworth Road for Luton Town?
Are they same time kickoff as well?
No, one's at
Okay.
very early, 11 a.m., and then the other
Right.
one's at
So
like 2 or something.
Frank can be at both. No, I just wondered how it was actually working. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it gives him chance to, like you say, put virtually the whole squad out there and see how they go, get minutes into the legs. I've always preferred having these friendlies kind of more at home than going on these big tours to Asia and Australia and things like that, because I think they're quite pointless. I get it, it's a fan thing, but I like these where we stay at home and we play smaller teams and go on the pub pitches and things like that. I'm not saying either of these two are pub teams, but it's like the old days, isn't it, where you played a lot of games quite quickly and get stuck in and see where the players are at and get them firing. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think we'll see at the end of it, like you say, have a good idea of who he wants to keep and who he doesn't.
Okay. What do you make of it, Luke? Is it a tryout for some of these guys that might be on the periphery of the squad?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's literally for everybody, because no one's guaranteed to play, especially when we're still in the market for. By reports, we are still in the market for pretty much every position. So when you look at the young players, it will be a decision whether or not they stay in the youth teams, whether they can go out on loan, or actually could they pick up a few minutes here and there, for instance, in a Carabao Cup, which might not be the absolute priority this year. So I think it's a case of everybody's going to be looked at. There'll be certain players that are in and around the first team, and we think, well, hang on a minute, your Brian Hill, your Solomons, for instance, that might be a case of, are they good enough to step up and be one of the main sort of players? If not, could we get rid? So, and I go back to it, our squad is probably 40 man strong when you include some of the youth products like George Abbott, for instance, who seems to have been absolutely smashing all the fitness tests, etc., in training. So when you add up all the players and the first team squads and the youth players, it's probably a 40 man squad. And yeah, you can't have a squad going into a preseason or a season, half cooked. So it makes sense if you've that big a squad, if players are not being shifted in the immediate future, then yeah, give them all a tryout, see how it goes, and then there might be one or two that just shine through, and you think, yeah, we'll keep him in and around, and he'll gain experience. You look at like Vuskovic, for instance, is he going to be the best centre back in the world, which apparently he is if you read YouTube, or is he just a youth player that's played well against the League One side and actually isn't ready for the Premier League? These are the games where hopefully the managers make that decision, and you're playing, as you said, against an old school sort of physical men, and you can see whether they're up to the task physically.
Yeah, you just reminded me, actually. He just reminded me we get to see the best center back in the world again on Saturday, and Luka Vuskovic. He broke the Spurs internet, from his last game. Any final words from you both? And also, please, Luke, give yourself a plug here. Thank you for being with me this Thursday evening. I'm a little bit tardy on the hour that I promised you, but we got there, at least somewhat close enough. So a little bit of extra time, a little bit of additional injury time. But thank you, my friend. I thought you were brilliant last week, and good to have you again on this evening. So tell us about Spotlight on Spurs, any streams that are coming up, or what's the plan?
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks again for having me on. Always enjoy it, coming along and having a chat all things Spurs, particularly Morgan Gibbs-White. I think that should be on the end of Tottenham Hotspur at the moment. Yeah, so I'm actually streaming tonight, 9:30. We will be discussing a very special subject that nobody's ever discussed, and it's Morgan Gibbs-White. We'll also be discussing several other things that we'll go over. I've got a great panel on. I've just started releasing a new series on the channel as well called My Spurs videos preview, and basically it's just the same 10 questions to individuals. It's a pre-recorded thing. I've only done 2 episodes, but they'll be coming out probably 2 or 3 a week in the coming weeks. And yeah, just do the one live stream at this moment in time with work kids and several other bits and pieces. The amount of time that it goes in just setting up a stream, people don't understand. So just the weekly one for me, and then the odd videos. So yeah, it'd be great for anyone to pop along and say hi.
Please, everybody. I think he has a lot of great things to say. I like his style. So please, everybody, go over to Luke's Spotlight on Spurs and show him some love, please. And he has a stream later on. So grab yourself something to eat, get a little walk in, and then join him later at 9:30, it looks like. So please, everybody, head on over there and do that. Soren, any final words from yourself? Anything going on?
No, I mean, the one thing I will say is, since Luke brought it up, Vuskovic, what a debut game for us. Maybe he's the number 6 that we're looking for in the future. You know, can score a goal, can run with the ball, and can tackle. I think he is going to be an exciting player going forward. Yeah, I think he's the sort of player that can get Spurs fans back on board and goosebumps and things like that. You know, every time he goes forward, we're going to expect a goal now. But no, I just think, looking forward to Saturday. The one question I do have, though, seeing as we've got 2 games, how many games are Chelsea playing on Saturday? Are they playing like the whole of League One or something? Give their players a chance. But no, look, the season's not far away. Time to get excited again. We're going to win a cup, and come on, you Spurs.
Chelsea need like a baseball season, 164 games or whatever, you know, to get a look at their whole
and you'll
squad
still have
players.
You'll still have players complaining they're not playing.
Yeah, I think it's almost like if you're a footballer, there's a 25% chance you might be on Chelsea's books. They have that many players.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those, you know, as a kid, who do you play for? Oh, Spurs. Oh, that's great. Who do you play for? Chelsea? Yeah, coach, you do.
Yeah, half the room.
I've never heard you. I've never seen you on the pitch, but yeah, I'm one of 154 in the squad. So
every Fabrizio tweet. Every
I see-
Fabrizio tweet, they're always every other one is a Chelsea player being linked with a move away or a move
Yeah.
in. Sorry.
I see something on X the other day saying that in 50 years' time, you'll never be further than 5 meters from an ex-Chelsea player. I was like, yes, that's exactly right.
Every Premiership team is made up of ex-Chelsea players.
Yeah.
Gosh, that is the best of the jokes, actually. Yeah, being 5 feet away from a Chelsea player. Thank you to everybody for being along with us. Thank you for Dermatron, Tin Man, Faz Radfar, Elvis G for supporting the show. Thanks to everybody participating in the chat. We will be back Saturday for the watch alongs. I'll be getting up nice and early for those alongside my fellow Yank, Nick, to just see more glimpses of the greatest center back of all time, and Luka Vuskovic, as well as some others get their chance. And good to see a little addition of the Soren's co-hosts there. You know, they were being very patient, you know, behind you. And thank you to everybody for supporting the show. Smash the like button on your way out, and we will see you next time. Come on, you Spurs, and looking forward to Saturday.
Come on.